after that brilliant conversation with Governor Kelly Ayotte, we now, drop straight to the bottom of the barrel. Rank punditry with our good friends, Dr. Dante Scala of the University of New Hampshire and Greg Moore with Americans for Prosperity. And Greg, by the way, actually pulled that shirt off of Lamar Alexander when he was running for president. I love it. He wrestled him to the ground and stole it, right? Right, Greg?
Those are the good old days, my
New
friend.
Hampshire's first congressional district, which was in the lean Democrat category, is now in the likely Democratic category. Greg Moore, AFP, are they right?
I think we'll know a heck of a lot more on the 30th when the campaign finance figures come out. We've had a chance to look through some of the Democrats who've been in the race, but a lot of the Republicans who got into the race didn't enter, specifically some of the folks like Anthony DiLorenzo, who is likely to be the biggest spender on the Republican side.
Right.
So we don't even know. I think it's probably a little premature. But they have publication schedules. You'd think though, considering you have such an important fundraising quarter coming out in just a few weeks, that they might have found a way to get their production schedule kicked back a few weeks so they have the knowledge of that. There really hasn't been much, if any, public polling in the first congressional district to this point, and certainly knowing just how significant the Democratic primary is going to be. And for one last crack, it's going to be a September primary, which means that whoever is the winner on the Democratic side, there's going to need to be a lot of fence mending that takes place over 8 weeks. So I'd say it's probably a little premature. Let's wait till early February and maybe get a better feel for it.
Dante Scala, a toss-up. These are the categories they use at Cook. Toss-up, leans Democrat, likely Democrat. What's the first CD?
Where'd they put it?
It was leans, and now it's likely.
At least leans. I mean, it's been a decade, right? It's been more than a decade since Republicans won that seat. Republicans have gone 0 for the Trump era in terms of winning federal office in New Hampshire. I don't understand why you'd start anywhere else but say that seat, again, which is the more gettable one for Republicans, but still, it's been a decade. Why you wouldn't start with at least lean, and if
let's cut to the chase. All federal races are presumed Democrat. They're not even likely. It's beyond likely. They are presumed Democrat because New Hampshire does not vote for Republicans at the federal level, and you've got the record going back to 2010 to prove it. So good. That's it. That one was easy because I'm just ignoring everything you said. So okay, good, excellent. So so now let's go to the conversation about what's happening in the Democratic Party. We'll start with you, Dante. You see this new poll that shows that the number of Democrats who self-identify as liberal has doubled over the past 2 decades. That people, a party that was very much a center to center left party is now a left party with some center in it. That's the national, that's the national map. And yet you've got a theoretical primary in the second CD. A state representative from Nashua, Boschman, is a solid progressive, abolish ICE. She's running against incumbent Megan Goodlander. In the first CD, you've got 4 progressives. I see if I can do some memory. Carly Berliant, Sarah Shaziz. I'm sorry, Sarah, I can't say your last name ever. She's the one with all the Y's. Representative Heath Howard and Christian Arucha, all running on the abolish ICE, or as Sarah C. put it, abolish ICE is just the start. She wants to go beyond. I don't know, like eliminate the letters from my keyboard. I don't know. But anyways, they are solid progressive. My prediction, no progressive will win any Democratic primary in 2024 because progressives don't win Democratic primaries in New Hampshire. Dante Scala.
Well, it's funny, right? At the beginning of this cycle, we all started looking for, where's the Carol Shea Porter of this race, right? And that dates all the way back to 2006. And she's one of the, few, if maybe the sole example of one of, a progressive candidate, winning a primary. And it, so far, at least, we're still wanting for that Carol Shea Porter candidacy. And it just goes to show, I think, how Shea Porter is not only one of the more unusual stories of the 21st
Right.
century in New Hampshire politics, but I think one of the more underrated politicians in the 21st century in New Hampshire. I mean, here's someone who came out of nowhere, was
Right.
truly a grassroots candidate, and then also had staying power, right? She hung around for a good decade, trading the seat back and forth with Frank Ginta, but we're not seeing that so far. I mean, people have been pointing to, folks like Christian Urrutia and so forth, but his fundraising in the fourth quarter trailed off after a good opening. And so far we've got, same old, same old. We got Maura Sullivan, Stephanie Shaheen. Are they liberals? I mean, they're not progressive
Right.
liberals. They're more kind of center left candidates who would call themselves progressive, but certainly aren't hardcore progressives. And that seems to be what New Hampshire Democrats, at least the mainstream of them,
Right.
are happy with and content with.
So how about a Greg Moore? We're going to finally see that Bernie Sanders style candidate in a state that gave Bernie Sanders the first in the nation primary win twice.
Well, it really depends on if the progressives can focus on one of the four candidates. You
Right.
raised a great point. They're splitting themselves up. If that theme continues, then there is probably more than enough votes that Sullivan and Shaheen can fight amongst each other and still manage to eke out a win. If one of the progressives is able to rise to the top and is able to basically bring all and coalesce all of the progressive votes behind them, or most of the progressive votes behind them, then there's certainly enough votes, because Lord knows that's where the energy of the party is right now. The energy of the party is among the progressives. I haven't seen evidence yet, and I'll admit that I'm probably not the person that most congressional Democrat candidates call and ask for advice. But
Their mistake, Greg. Their mistake.
I'll be the first. But I haven't seen any evidence that there's one single candidate who is dominating the progressives. But look, there's still a long time. There's still a long time. We're still talking about 8 months of campaigning, and that is an absolute lifetime here in New Hampshire. Once the legislative session ends, basically the end of May, that's when the headlines will be dominated by what's going on in these congressional races in particular, and maybe even a U.S. Senate primary. But it's going to take, what it's going to take is what Carol Shea Porter did so well, which is to coalesce and energize a whole bunch of progressives, which she was able to do masterfully around the war in Iraq at the time. She did a fantastic job of getting all the progressives excited and heading in her direction. Haven't seen it yet, but there's still plenty of time.
Okay, stick a
Greg's
pin in that. I want to
absolutely
actually.
right,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Greg's absolutely right. I mean, beginning of 2006, very few people knew who Carol Shea Porter was, right? Back then. I gotta say, so far though, I mean, if I'm Maura Sullivan, I like the way things are shaping up, right? I mean, no, none of these progressives, at least so far,
Right.
has shown signs of kind of having a lightning strike on their hands, right? And so if you're Maura Sullivan, again, you're very much like Stephanie Shaheen ideologically, but if enough Democrats next September are in a time for change attitude, well, that's not going to help Stephanie Shaheen. But maybe they're not willing to go far out on a limb and accept one of these progressive candidates, or maybe none of them ever catch fire. Then if you're Maura Sullivan, you're putting up good fundraising numbers again and again and again, and if you're the safe alternative next September, that would, it's again a long way to go. Greg's absolutely right, but
So let me
I
so let
like
me ask
where
you
I'm
that you
sitting
guys
about
bring
that.
up something that I'm hearing a lot from NH Journal listeners, which is readers, which is what happened. I thought Shaheen was just going to blow the field out. You know what I mean? Like she's going to show up. She's got her mom. She's got her mom's money. She's got the Shaheen name. It's going to be Stephanie Shaheen and cast. Like remember on Gilligan's Island when they went the professor and the rest. It was just going to be and the rest because Shaheen's name and money would be. She hasn't won a single election primary fundraising cycle. Excuse me, quarter. She hasn't won a single quarter, and she's not blowing the doors off. Were our expectations wrong, Greg Moore?
I think it's um, to Dante's point, I think maybe we were underestimating Maura Sullivan a little bit.
Ah, okay.
And I think it's not that Stephanie Shaheen's numbers are bad. They're not, she's not putting up bad numbers. It's just that her numbers pale in comparison to what Sullivan's doing. And Sullivan's doing an outstanding job of developing a national fundraising network. And we saw that in 2018 as well, where she did that pretty conclusively. But it also needs to be pointed out that even though she vastly out-fundrated Chris Pappas, he beat her. So I think that it remains to be seen if Sullivan has learned how to translate the dollars and some of the national network that she's built up into actual voters on election day.
Well, I'm still betting on Shaheen just because of history, whatever. But I think the product known as inevitability has to be stored very carefully, because as Hillary Clinton saw in Iowa in 2008, you puncture that bag and let a little air in, and the inevitability just goes away, Dante Scala. And I think that's where Stephanie Shaheen is. I think that that box of inevitability she had, man, the shelf life is approaching fast, and she's going to have to compete just like anyone else. And I've seen no sign that she has the political chops to go out and do just a regular, level playing field campaign the way Maura Sullivan has.
Democratic mood is not the mood that's going to be friendly to legacy candidates. Right. So she's going to have to earn this. And if there's any silver lining to the meh start she's had, it's that, if she's got the right team around her, if she has the right political instincts, she knows that this is going to be a fight and she's got to up her game. Now, can she? We'll see, but at least you're not thinking this far out, well, this is going to be a cakewalk. Maura Sullivan showing that. And she's had, Sullivan, as Greg pointed out, was a savvy candidate in a number of ways, dating back to her battle with Pappas. And then when she lost, she kind of stuck in there, built a name for herself in the party, and has fundraising networks of her own, being a veteran and so forth. She's got national fundraising capacity. So
let's talk about another legacy in the U.S. Senate race. Johnny Sununu, the last time he won an election, the Iraq War was still popular, and now he's running again. Dante Scala, is John E. Sununu and the name enough to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate?
I hate to say yes, because I hate to be so, to bow to inevitability, so far ahead of time. I guess, what I wonder about with, I was just looking at some polling that was done at the end of last year in that race. And if you took the names, Sununu and Brown, and you just whited them out and you just looked at the numbers among Republican conservatives in New Hampshire and so forth, they don't look a lot different. They don't look like day and night.
Right.
And so now the question is, though, sometimes inevitability can really work for you. And it's pretty clear that the boys network in Washington, D.C. is all in for Sununu. And one has to think that's been done at least in part with the blessing of Donald Trump. And so what we have to wonder about, looking forward to the January fundraising numbers is, will the tap be turned off for Scott Brown? And so and that works a couple of different ways for John Sununu. The obvious way with, you want better to have more money than less, but also if Scott Brown can challenge Sununu on his very checkered record when it comes to support for the head of his party, the less that Brown can do, the more Sununu can ignore him and basically waltz, toward the nomination. Brown needs money and he needs buy-in from, folks like you in the media to say there's a race here.
Greg Moore?
I think Dante nailed it. January 30th is going to tell the tale of the tape. We're going to learn so much about this race when all the campaign finance reports come out. Number one, how strongly has Johnny Sununu converted his legacy, his name, his time, his connections that he's built working in business? How well has he converted all of that into actual dollars and cents? Does he just vaporize the field? Right. And the second point, that Dante also pointed out is what's happening with Scott Brown's dollars. Is he still able to raise money, or did the spigot just completely shut off? If he doesn't have the resources to compete, and the resources to compete in this race, that is probably going to top my estimate probably about $250 million. Raising $250,000 or $300,000 in Q4 is just not going to be good enough for Brown. If we don't see something significantly more than that, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for him going forward.
$250 million for New Hampshire, a state of 1.4 million people.
Well, it was $120 million in 2016. And you could make the arguable case that the stakes are higher in a midterm than in a presidential for the U.S. Senate. So that money is going to go somewhere. So I think you're probably looking at $250 million. And the beauty of it is that campaigns are getting much more sophisticated. They're not just going to be dumping all that money into television ads like they used to. They're going to be using targeted applications and digital and things like that.
And of course, New Hampshire Journal, the most valuable resource if you're buying your advertising dollars.
Of course. New Hampshire Journal is going to be bucks up. Next time Dante and I come on the podcast, we're going to have gold lame microphones to speak into.
Yeah, where is that?
In a palatial
I just want to say
studio.
one more. We got to move on because I wanted to. But one thing about the U.S. Senate race, it seems to me, is that since 2020 in particular, there's been this floating MAGA vote out there. It leached onto Bob Burns in the second CD, and the establishment candidate got blown away. George Hansel, Don Bolduc. How the heck did he become a Senate nominee? Well, the floating MAGA vote.
But
let me finish.
Michael,
let me finish. I don't see a place for the floating MAGA vote to land in this year's Senate race. I just don't think that there's not a natural handle for those voters who are looking for the MAGA voter to grab. And so I think it's going to be an even split, and that makes it that much harder for Scott Brown to beat the guy who's pursued as inevitable.
The 2022 race was an anomaly because there just wasn't a lot of money being spent in the second district in the U.S. Senate campaigns. And
I'm sorry, I disagree completely. The Democrats spent millions on Bob Burns.
Well, that's my point. There wasn't money being spent by the campaigns, and the Democrats saw an opening, and they saw an opening to elevate Don Bolduc and Bob Burns moving forward, perceiving that those perhaps weren't the strongest candidates. They were successful in that endeavor. That's not going to be the dynamic you're going to be seeing. I don't believe here. I don't think you're going to see that. I think there's going to be enough money in this cycle that that window of opportunity is not going to be around.
So let's get
go ahead.
about
Michael. What
I'm
curious about, Michael, is let's say Scott Brown can't give John Sununu much of a race.
Right.
I'm curious, what kind of Republican is John Sununu 2.0? Like, how will he kind of present himself? Because, you look at his website right now, it's rather generic, right? And again, early days, but is he going to be try to be like a Susan Collins New England Republican? Is he going to basically say, well, the kind of Republican I was in 2008 is good enough for now? What's he learned from his brother about, running in a modern day Republican, as a modern day New England Republican? I'm just kind of curious how he puts, we know he's a Sununu, and that'll get him some ways, but I'm wondering, to put it another way, what's the special sauce that's going to allow him to be as sturdy a candidate as Chris Pappas? What does he take into a general election where you're going to probably have a fairly unpopular president on your hands running alongside you? What's he going to do? And that's probably something he needs to figure out sooner rather than later.
I agree completely. I can't wait to watch and see how this evolves, and it goes back to the problem with Republicans in New Hampshire and at the federal level. So let's talk about the race that should be getting most of the attention. It doesn't exist yet. I know what you're thinking, Michael. How can you be dismissive of John Kuiper, that political powerhouse that is John Kuiper? But we had Governor Ayotte earlier, and I asked her what advice did she have for Cindy Warmington. She hated that question, which of course is why I asked it. Greg Moore, Dante Scala, start with you, Dante. What advice do you have for Cindy Warmington?
Okay, I'll go first.
You go first then.
I always hate it when you toss it out to both of us, Michael. And then we both have to pause and be like, okay, who's going first? But no, Cindy Warmington just needs to put a number in her head as to how much of her own money she's going to spend. I mean, she's got to do that early. She didn't do that 2 years ago and just kept going back to the checkbook over and over and over again. That's usually a recipe for disaster. She needs to put a dollar figure in her head early to figure out how much of her own money she's going to put into this race if she decides to get in. Right. Because it is hard, historically, very hard to take out a governor after their first term. There's very little history of it. In fact, I think only one time that I can think of it happening. So I think that Kelly Ayotte is doing a lot of the things. You look at her fundraising dollar figures, absolutely vaporizes what Chris Sununu did as an incumbent. And she understands that. She's putting herself in a position to be out very publicly. She's talking about a number of popular issues going into an election year. And I think she's really found a way to embrace the benefits the role of an incumbent governor, with one exception, which is she's still leaning on "Don't Mass Up" New Hampshire, which was a great slogan for an open seat election. Maybe not so great a slogan, but she still has plenty of time to come up with what would be the right messaging for an incumbent trying to run on their record, which isn't "Don't Mass Up New Hampshire."
So let me ask you this question, Dante. I'll ask you this way. Why isn't there an obvious, why isn't Warmington in the race or someone else in the race? I mean, you've got Trump in the 30s, you got a midterm election. It's going to be terrible for Republicans, generally speaking. You got a first term Republican. She's only been there. She says she'll have had, 2 years in office. That's all. It's not like she's a household name. Where are the Democrats?
I think Democrats look at, you look at Kelly Ayotte's numbers, and you'd be hard pressed to find any governor with disapproval numbers that high. Mm-hmm. You really have to go back to Craig Benson, right? The last governor who lost after a single term. I don't think Democrats believe the numbers. Not that the polling is faulty, but I don't think they look at that and see someone who is all that vulnerable. And the reason I say that is because no one's in the race to go after, to try. And is it the case maybe that Ayotte are those numbers just an after effect of the fact that she was a senator first and was sort of very partisan first, and now that she's governor, will those numbers start to turn around, and will she become a lot more approvers than disapprovers over the next year? I mean, if I were Warmington, I guess I'd lean hard into things like affordability and cost of living, which New Hampshire voters talk about a good bit. I guess I would try that, but I think she and others think it's going to be that they don't believe that Ayotte's another Craig Benson. If they did, they'd be in.
Okay, so let me say the craziest thing I'm going to say, and then you guys, Cindy Warmington isn't running. Even if she gets in the race, she's not running. Like, she'll be on the ballot, you know what I mean? She'll be on the ticket, but people, you know what people do who want to run for office? Anyone back in the class? They run for office. That's what they do. If Cindy Warmington were going to run for governor, she'd have started running 6 months ago, just like they're doing over in the first CD. Let me tell you something. I don't know. I've only met Christian Ruccia a few times. He seems like a smart guy. He knows what he believes. He's raised decent money. But it was like obvious in the first 32 seconds, this guy wants to run. He wants to win. I'm saying that's what candidates do. Chris Sununu, did anyone ever have a doubt about what Chris Sununu was doing? Even if Cindy Warmington, who, by the way, reports were that she was going to have announced by today, like this was expect the announcement by January 15th. There's no Warmington. Even if she lets herself get talked into being on the ballot, she's not going to run. She'll show up, she'll wave, she'll make some calls, blah, 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 but she's going to Tom Sherman it. She's just going to be a name on the ballot. And at this point, why would you let yourself be that name on the ballot? So what do you think? Am I crazy? What's up?
I think you're right. You want to see the fire in the belly right out of the gate. That's definitely a sign that you want to see. I will say something that colors what Dante was mentioning earlier is all of the governor's race is going to be held against the backdrop of a U.S. Senate race. Right. It is going to be like a hurricane passing through. So the reason why the president's presidents' parties tend to do poorly in midterms, generally speaking, with a few notable exceptions. The reason why presidents' parties tend to do poorly is because the other side has a natural turnout advantage.
Right.
They're mad because they're getting upset because they're not getting what they want. The party that's in power is doing the things, passing the big, beautiful bill, things like that, and they're fat and happy. There's one thing that can change that dynamic: money. And there's one thing that will not be lacking in the state of New Hampshire: money. So the Republicans will be getting out, and whatever you thought the tailwind was going to be is probably going to be a lot smaller than you thought on the front end, because you can close that gap. We saw that in 2018, where yes, it was a bad year for Republicans, and certainly here in New Hampshire it was a bad year for Republicans. But if you look at the U.S. Senate states where Donald Trump and his folks were putting their heavy emphasis, Republicans picked up seats in the U.S. Senate. So where there's money, you can change that dynamic, and there won't be a lack of money here.
So let's wrap up with this. The thing that's frustrating for me as a fan of sport, of politics, and that's what I am. This is my sport. I sit in the stands. I wear a jersey, but I just love a good game. Sometimes my team's quarterback sucks. I can admit that, no problem. Where's the Democrat who wants to run to do something? I think about our hero of the day, Carol Shea Porter, and you think about it, she's like, we got to get in there. We got to stop this war. We got to stop these people. I got a mission that I want to be on. And she was bold from showing up at a rally and getting thrown out, which she very wisely, opportunistically turned into an event. That didn't have to happen. She could have just walked away, gone home. No, she turned that into something. She was bold. She had a mission. She had something she wanted to do. I look at around the state of New Hampshire. Is there a Democrat who, look, I need to be governor because whatever, we got to save our schools. We got to, stop the whatever crime, something, and to a degree, you could argue that a lot of the candidates at the federal level are kind of similar. It's like, I need to win because Trump's bad and I'm a Democrat. And so no one's doing anything. When was the last time someone did something in an election cycle in New Hampshire that was bold? I can't think of it. Dante?
No.
Do you agree with me that there doesn't seem to be anybody in the Democratic Party who's like like you look at New York, and whether you hated the other people, there were people who were like champing at the bit to be the next to be the next governor. For a while there, what's her name, the Republican who decided not to run, Stefanik. She was, I'm saying, she wasn't in the race yet, and she was already in the race because it was obvious. Here's why I need to be governor. Where's that person in New Hampshire?
Well, not running for governor, to be sure. I think you've got, you got the federal, congressional elections are different. I think you've got, Shaheen and Sullivan talking about things like affordability and so forth. But it's, again, Shea Porter was so different because she came from, the grassroots and had that message, that anti-war message that was so potent at that time. And she it'll be interesting to see whether how Democrats this cycle, are they able to kind of find that one thing like to emphasize over and over again, or do they even need to? That's another thing, is that, when you're running against an unpopular president, do you necessarily need to do anything all that special in order to win, as much as you'd like to see them do so, Michael?
Sure.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just, you can be a B+ candidate.
Absolutely. So how about it, Greg Moore? Has got Trump enough to win?
Well, here's the thing. I think part of the challenge, or to both your points, Carol Shea Porter was basically a once in a generation style candidate who was able to capture a moment and benefit, and then captured a dynamic where the incumbent Republican basically thought he could take the general election off, only to learn that the wave was coming. Here's the thing that's important to understand. Most of these candidates engage in some herding. They get around this idea of talking about a small number of issues because they don't want to be the one that makes the mistake that's disqualifying.
Good point.
And that's what happens when you have heavily managed, heavily consulted candidates who don't want to lose badly. Right. What we're going to see, what I think, is you're going to see somebody that group before that you mentioned at the beginning at the top of this, someone is going to break out. Someone's going to have that eureka moment, realize, you know what? I'm not going to spend anywhere near as much money as Mara Sullivan or Stephanie Shaheen. I got to go do it on my own. I got to build a grassroots operation. I got to do it. And that person, I think, will have a chance because they'll realize that they have nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, like Carol Shea Porter, it's all upside. It is all upside. So someone's going to figure it out. Probably, I would say, spring. Someone's just going to have to take a road where they're going to start pushing really, really crazy stuff. And by the way, getting off of social media is not that message.
Well, you don't think that Carlin Berrion's idea that all the candidates should take a month off social media? That's not the. You know what would help your campaign? Stop talking to the voters for a month. That'd be really good. And whatever you do, don't go where they are, because I know they live in front of their phones. You don't want to be there. You want to be are you in the Weekly Shopper? Maybe you should have an ad in the Weekly Shopper. That'd be helpful.
So I think maybe it's going to be one of the three other progressive candidates in the race because I think maybe that might be disqualifying. But no, someone's going to break out and say, hey, we're going to do things differently.
Right.
We're going to take a shot. We're going to go be big and bold as you to your point about whether you're running for governor or running for Congress. We're going to try something because if you just try this normal regular campaign, you're just going to be rolled over by the money of Shaheen and Sullivan and not even have a chance.
Well, listen, we had a chance to talk to the three of you and two of you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. University of New Hampshire political science professor Dante Scala and Greg Moore, who does something that nobody knows. Thank you so much. But he does it for Americans for prosperity. So that's key. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.